Florida State entered the 2024 season riding a wave of hype. They were fresh off an ACC championship, and preseason voters slotted them inside the top 10. Fans thought this was another step toward national relevance. But the story unfolded differently. It started with a banger in Dublin, Ireland, where Georgia Tech stunned the Seminoles 24-21. Florida State had been double-digit favorites, yet they were bullied at the line of scrimmage. Quarterback Haynes King and running back Jamal Haynes for Tech exposed flaws in FSU's trenches that preseason optimism had ignored. The supposed powerhouse looked shaky from game one. Roster turnover was another dagger. Losing star quarterback Jordan Travis to the NFL left a massive hole. His replacement, DJ Uiagalelei, brought experience but carried the same inconsistencies that haunted him at Clemson. Add in a rebuilt receiving core and a defense patched with transfers, and chemistry problems were inevitable. Then came Boston College. Despite entering as 16.5-point favorites, the Seminoles quickly found themselves trailing behind a Bill O'Brien-led squad with dynamic quarterback Thomas Castellanos. Even if FSU fought back, the early optics were clear. This wasn't a top 10 team. By mid-season, it was hard to argue otherwise. A program that looked destined for playoff chatter was instead gasping just to save face. That's why Florida State's 2024 campaign fits the overrated label perfectly. They had the name, the preseason love, and the Vegas lines. But when the games kicked off, the shine faded fast. Indiana rolled into 2024 with few believing they'd do more than just improve. New head coach Curt Cignetti was unproven at Indiana, and many saw this season as a chance to rebuild, not dominate. The Big Ten spotlight didn't expect the Hoosiers to make noise. But they did more than just make noise. They made history. They finished 11-2 overall, with an 8-1 record in Big Ten play. That's Indiana's first ever college football playoff appearance, first 10-win season under Cignetti, and first season with that many conference wins. Their offense was efficient and explosive. Quarterback Curtis Rourke threw for over 3,000 yards, had high completion rate, multiple touchdowns, few interceptions. They broke school records in some games, yards, point totals, and crushed expectations. Because nobody expected Indiana to reach the playoff, much less win Big Ten games en masse, their season felt earned, not given. Indiana in 2024 is underrated because they exceeded what was predicted. Belief, effort, and execution all came together. They showed that program history and hype aren't everything. Strong coaching, player buy-in, and consistency can flip the script. USC came into 2023 with a giant spotlight. Lincoln Riley at the helm, Heisman winner Caleb Williams returning, plus a roster full of elite recruits. People expected them to dominate. They began the season ranked number 6 in preseason polls. That kind of hype carries weight. But sometimes hype is its own opponent. And for USC in 2023, that was true. Early on, the weaknesses showed. Their defense was a frequent talking point, not in a good way. Fans and analysts both complained about missed tackles, breakdowns in coverage, and inconsistencies, especially later in games. Offensive production was solid, but the coaching decisions, especially play-calling balance, felt overly reliant on big play upside. Sometimes that worked, too often it didn't. A big fun fact: they dropped out of the AP Top 25 for the first time under Lincoln Riley after a loss to Washington, despite starting strong. That speaks to how steep the fall was. USC also gave up leads in games people felt they should close. That hurt their credibility. The move from Pac-12 to Big Ten loomed, but their 2023 performance showed that changing conferences doesn't erase internal issues. So yes, USC was overrated in 2023. They looked like a blue blood contender on paper, but didn't match the standard their past success and recruiting promised. The disappointment was real, and the perception of overrated seems deserved when expectations overshoot performance. Missouri quietly had one of the more surprising seasons in 2023. They weren't headlining many preseason storylines, but they built momentum and proved plenty of doubters wrong. Under coach Eli Drinkwitz and with Brady Cook at quarterback, Missouri showed steadiness, big plays, and an ability to win tight games. Cook's numbers were good. Over 3,000 passing yards, multiple touchdowns, and some clutch performances, including an upset win over Kansas State. Those moments shifted belief in how good Missouri could be. The Tigers also faced tough SEC competition and didn't shrink under pressure. Wins over ranked or respected teams added luster to their resume. One fun fact: Missouri routed Ohio State to win the Cotton Bowl in December 2023, finishing the season 10-2 overall, 6-2 in SEC play, and ranked near the top of final polls. That bowl win was a statement. Defense got better as the season progressed, and their identity sharpened. They weren't flashy every game, but they were consistent. As Cook showed poise in multiple tight contests, Missouri earned trust. So yeah, Missouri was underrated in 2023. They didn't get the hype USC got, but they delivered. Their season reminds us that steady work and clutch execution often outplay preseason buzz. Texas A&M walked into 2022 with swagger. Ranked number 6 in the preseason polls, they had the look of an SEC heavyweight, ready to throw punches at Alabama and Georgia. Jimbo Fisher was still riding the wave of that number. One recruiting class, a group stuffed with 5-star talent that had fans dreaming about college football playoffs instead of just bowl trips. Facilities were shiny, boosters were smiling, and the Aggies were supposed to finally cash in on all that investment. But then the games started, and the story flipped fast. Instead of storming through the SEC West, Texas A&M stumbled to a 5-7 finish with just 2 conference wins. That wasn't just a slip. It was their first losing season since 2009. Worse, they rattled off a 6-game losing streak, their longest in decades. For a team everyone thought was top 10 material, that was brutal. Sure, they finished on a high note, upsetting number 5 LSU, but by then the damage was already done. So why were they overrated? The hype train was fueled by recruiting rankings and preseason polls, not by proven depth or consistency. Young talent is exciting, but in the SEC it takes more than stars on paper to survive Saturdays. Injuries, shaky quarterback play, and a lack of offensive rhythm sank them. Fun fact: the Aggies missed out on a bowl, snapping a long streak of postseason appearances. For a program with that much money and noise, it was the definition of overrated. If hype was electricity, TCU came in quietly with just enough spark, but they lit up the season. Sonny Dykes in his first year as head coach, Max Duggan emerging from backup status, and a team that many didn't give a chance to win it all in the Big 12. But man, they made believers fast. TCU went 12-0 in the regular season, 9-0 in Big 12 play. They took the conference by storm. Offensive numbers were wild. TCU averaged over 40 points per game and nearly 7 yards per play. Max Duggan completed nearly 65% of his passes with a 30-touchdown to 4-interception season. That kind of efficiency isn't average, it's elite. Fun fact: TCU hadn't had an undefeated regular season since 2010. Yet in 2022, under first-year coaching, they pulled it off. They became the first Big 12 team to win a CFP game and reach the national championship game for the first time in school history. They lost big there, 65-7 to Georgia. But making it was itself a statement. People overlooked them early because the Big 12 is deep, because their defense had questions, and because preseason rankings didn't love them. But by the end, TCU showed resilience, balance, and clutch performance. Underdogs? Yes. Fireworks? Definitely. Big energy, big expectations, big letdowns. That's Iowa State in 2021. They entered the season ranked number 7 in the AP preseason poll, which was the highest in school history. That ranking carried weight. Fans thought the Cyclones could continue rising, maybe even break through to college football playoff talk. Coach Matt Campbell was under the spotlight to take them higher. They had offensive stars like Brock Purdy and Breece Hall, weapons on both run and pass, and strong continuity in coaching. That made many believe Iowa State would go deep in the Big 12. But then the season played out, and the record was 7-6 overall, 5-4 in the Big 12. The bowl game didn't help. They lost to Clemson in the Cheez-It Bowl by just a bit. Some games showed promise, many showed cracks. In several matchups, they barely scraped by or blew leads. The defense sometimes couldn't stop big plays, special teams miscues added up, and consistency was lacking. They didn't dominate the conference when people thought they could. A fun fact: before 2021, Iowa State had only won 9 games in a season 3 times in its long history, and never 10. The win total bets set them at 9.5 wins, pushing the betting markets to expect 10 or more. That was bold. In short, Iowa State was overrated because expectation outpaced execution. They had pieces, hype, and history, but results didn't match. They weren't bad. They just weren't what many thought they would be. Quiet confidence, steady growth, kind of like warm sunshine before a storm. That's Michigan was 2021. Not many picked them to be elite. Many expected them to be good, but not great. Preseason projections had Michigan around 6 to 8 wins, or maybe 7 to 5. The public didn't expect them to be title contenders yet. Still, there was reason for optimism. Their defense was strong, returning many players. On offense, they had emerging talent and stability. They had been close in past seasons, just missing the big moments. Many analysts said if the quarterback play held up and injury luck was decent, Michigan could surprise. Then they did. Michigan finished 12-2 overall, including the postseason, with big wins in Big Ten play. They beat Ohio State in a close game to win the Big Ten championship. The defense showed up in big moments, especially in tight matchups. Their running game and red zone offense improved. Fun fact, Michigan had 35 of 38 defenders set new career bests in tackles in that season. That shows how active and cohesive their defense was. Also, they had multiple players who were underrated before the season. Guys who stepped up and made difference plays when nobody was watching. People should care because Michigan's 2021 proves that underrated teams aren't just nice storylines. They shift power. When a program quietly builds depth, fixes weak links, and avoids collapse, they force respect. Michigan in 2021 earned that respect. Nobody knew 2020 would be this weird, but Penn State looked like a team many expected to bounce back. Going into the season, folks had high hopes. After decent outings in previous seasons, with plenty of returning players, plus the prestige of the program, many projected Penn State to be one of the Big Ten's stronger squads. But then the season peeled back expectations in dramatic fashion. They finished 4-5 overall, 4-5 in Big Ten play. A brutal start. They lost their first 5 games, something that had never happened in Penn State history dating back to 1887. That 0-5 hole was nearly impossible to climb out of. Some wins came late, but they didn't recover enough. They even opted out of bowl consideration after the regular season ended. Why overrated fits? First, injuries and opt-outs hurt. Players left due to COVID or other reasons. Second, they were installing a new offense with new coordinators, so there was growing pains. Their offense struggled in consistency. The defense couldn't always bail them out. Some losses were games many thought they should win. The expectations, driven by history and personnel return, were outpacing reality. Fun fact, Penn State missed out on its first bowl since the mid-2000s because of both their record and the decision to not pursue a bowl. Also, they lost to Indiana in overtime, 35-36, a game that highlighted errors in clock management and execution. So yes, Penn State in 2020 was overrated. Not because they were bad entirely, but because many thought the season would look far better than 4-5, with bowl games, wins over tougher opponents, etc. The promise was high. The delivery was below what was expected. Quietly ambitious, smartly coached, and often overlooked. That's Cincinnati in 2020. They didn't get the Power 5 respect that big schools do, but everything started clicking for the Bearcats under Luke Fickell. Many underestimated how good this team could become. They went 9-1 overall, 6-0 in American Athletic Conference play, and won the AAC championship game over Tulsa by a tight 27-24 score. They played consistently well, catching people's attention, and ended the season ranked number 8 in both the AP and coaches polls. Their only loss came in the Peach Bowl, a narrow defeat versus Georgia, 21-24, but that didn't erase what they had accomplished. What made them underrated? They didn't have the same media buzz as some Power 5 giants, but their quarterback Desmond Ridder was steady. Their defense played well, and the coaching staff maximized talent. They beat ranked teams, SMU, etc. They handled their conference impressively, and they showed they could win in pressure moments. Fun fact, 2020 was the first time Cincinnati had ever been ranked in the preseason AP Top 25 at number 20. Also, their home games were strong. They were undefeated at home that season. Why it matters. Cincinnati's 2020 season is proof that underrated teams can push boundaries. When people ignore you, you can still do your work, win games, and force recognition. They set the stage for bigger things. Bright lights, big expectations. Washington in 2019 entered the season with both. After a solid 2018, 10-4 record including a Pac-12 title game appearance, many believed the Huskies would take a step forward. They had experienced leadership, a strong recruiting class, ranked 16th nationally, second in the Pac-12, and returning playmakers on offense. But the season didn't unfold quite like many expected. Washington finished 8-5 overall, 4-5 in Pac-12 play. Their defensive stats were mixed. They surrendered around 222 passing yards per game, one of their worst since 2015. They lost some critical games at home, like to Oregon and Utah, where wins seemed possible. They also dropped to Stanford and Colorado in tight matchups. Fun fact, their season ended with a convincing Las Vegas Bowl win over Boise State, 38-7, which masked some of the inconsistency through the year. Washington also saw a coaching change looming. Chris Peterson announced 2019 would be his last season. That kind of off-field noise tends to influence perception. So yes, Washington was slightly overrated in 2019. They had too much hype relative to performance. Confidence was high, roster looked good, but lapses in close games, shaky defense, and some unexpected losses undercut what many thought would be a breakout. They weren't terrible, but many believed they'd be better. In 2019, the Minnesota Golden Gophers weren't exactly the talk of the town. If anything, they were the quiet neighbor no one noticed until they pulled up with a brand new sports car. Preseason predictions had them pegged for the bottom half of the Big Ten West, maybe 6th place. Hardly anyone thought they'd beat elite programs, and most figured PJ Fleck's "row the boat" mantra was just a catchy slogan, not a blueprint for success. But then the season kicked off, and suddenly the Gophers were rolling, fast. They started with 9 straight wins, the kind of streak nobody in Minneapolis had seen in over a century. The highlight came when they stunned number 4 Penn State, 31-26, in front of a home crowd that stormed the field like they'd just won the lottery. That win wasn't just big, it was historic, a statement that Minnesota wasn't playing for respect anymore. They were demanding it. The stats backed it up too. Tanner Morgan threw for more than 3,250 yards and 30 touchdowns, while Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson turned into one of the deadliest receiving duos in college football. Rodney Smith ran like he was chasing ghosts of old Minnesota legends, topping 1,100 rushing yards. And on defense, Antoine Winfield Jr. played like his dad had handed him a cape, snatching 7 interceptions. By the end, Minnesota had 11 wins, their most since 1904. They finished ranked number 10, beat Auburn in the Outback Bowl, and PJ Fleck walked away as Big Ten Coach of the Year. Not bad for a team that almost everyone had written off. Thanks for hanging in there and diving into the highs, lows, overrated and underrated across the years. If you enjoyed this ride through college football history, make sure you subscribe to CFB Almanac so you don't miss future breakdowns and contests. Drop a comment below telling me which team you think got the worst or best deal from expectations. Hit that like button if you learned something new today, and until next time.